Thanks for coming. We're going to try to start doing this kind of thing every time we release a game. This is our first attempt at it, so if you couldn't already tell, it's probably going to be a little low-key and maybe a little bit unprofessional, but we'll get better at it as we go. I'm really excited to talk about Knotwords. So much work and thought went into it, and I'm really excited to talk directly to you and show it to you. A lot of the times when we put games out, we put a lot of work into thinking about how we're going to present them to press and pitch them to press and all the stories around them. And sometimes the stories get written and sometimes some of the stories don't get written, and we realized, why not just tell them to you? Why not just tell you all the stories, and then you can feel like you heard all the things we wanted you to say, and maybe they're cool and maybe they're not. So anyway, let's get started. It's not really a post-mortem because we haven't launched yet, so to extend the metaphor, it's sort of like a...
When do we launch?
Oh yeah, we're going to launch on Thursday.
Oh, so Thursday you can go out and get it.
You can go out and get the game on
Okay,
Thursday,
cool.
but we'll show it to you today. So it's not a post-mortem. It's kind of like a baby shower, right? Because it's coming soon.
Yeah.
So welcome to our video game baby shower. Let's get right to it. Knotwords. This is the kind of game that I've been trying to design my whole career. I've been trying to design a lot of games my whole career. This is a big one of them. Coming up in game design in New York City, I was exposed to this game design scene that had this incredible respect and obsession with minimalism and elegance in game design, and it really influenced the kinds of games I am interested in, the kinds of games I think about designing really heavily. I think you can look at like Drop 7 as kind of an example of a kind of tentpole in the community in terms of developing a respect for these kinds of minimalist games. And amongst the designers that I talk to, there's a very particular kind of puzzle that we're all very impressed with. My favorite example of it is a Nintendo game called Picross. This is not a screenshot of Picross, but it's a very good example of a nonogram, which is what Picross is. Another great example of this kind of game is Sudoku. And in fact, there's this very cool Japanese company called Nicoli that exclusively publishes puzzles in this genre, and they're all famous all over the world, or some of them are famous all over the world. So what is this genre that I'm talking about? These games share a few traits that are pretty impressive to me if you take them all together. First, these games can be completely printed and played on a single piece of paper. That image of Sudoku that we were just looking at earlier, that's the whole game. There's no extra information that you need. Second, these games don't require you to enforce the rules as you play. If you think about solitaire, when you play solitaire, you have to make sure that everything you're doing is legal, that you can put this card on top of that card so that you don't accidentally cheat while you're playing the game. But in the kinds of games that we're talking about here, there's no such thing as cheating. You're just trying to make sure that your answer fulfills the rules of the game, and either you've done that or you haven't. If you think of a Sudoku puzzle, it's either filled in correctly, or there's something filled in wrong, or it's not filled in at all. And there are really no other options. There's no way to cheat while you're filling it in. Third, speaking of rules, these games tend to basically have only one rule. So for example, Sudoku's rule is that each row and column can only have one of each kind of number in it. And that's it. And square. Right, each column, row, and square. And that's it. That's the whole rule set to Sudoku. And that brings us to the fourth trait, which I tend to call the funnel. So far, the traits that I've been describing are pretty specialized, but they're pretty accomplishable. But the funnel is a real pain in the neck. If I were trying to sound like a fancy game designer, I'd say something like, every move you make in the puzzle should dramatically reduce the possibility space for players. Essentially, what I'm saying is that every move you make should be so impactful to your choices that it guides you through the puzzle by cutting down all of your options as you go forward. That's a lot of design language, so let's look at an example to make sense of this. If we look at crosswords, if I put the word solve in here, how much does that reduce our possibilities? Well, it adds one letter to 5 down, 6 down, 7 down, 8 down, and 9 down, but there are still so many words that could fit in those squares. But I don't know, maybe let's just look at 7 down. That's a short word. We filled in one of the 3 letters. Well, that could still be eel or old or ale or any number of words. Adding just 1 letter didn't really shrink down our possibility space in a meaningful way. It technically shrunk it down, but it didn't meaningfully shrink it. Let's contrast that with something like Sudoku. So if I'm looking at the Sudoku, if I had a 5 here, that means all of these cells can't be 5. And if I'm thinking about the other 5s in the puzzle, then I know that all of these cells can't be 5, and then I can already see this cell has to be 5, and I can go from there. That is like an incredible amount of just utter destruction of possibility space that you get from just entering one tiny number. We didn't even enter a 5-letter word. We just entered a 1-letter word, and it just decimated the possibilities in Sudoku. And the reason that this matters is like this is the quality. This is this magic thing that makes these games easy to get into, because it feels like as you're playing it that you're doing this brilliant solving because the puzzle is designed to help you get through it. It almost holds your hand as you go. And so I've been trying to make one of these kinds of games for a really long time, and it's been an incredible challenge, to put it mildly. But every once in a while, I'd have an idea, and when Jack and I started working together a couple years ago, I started pitching the ideas to Jack that I had. And a few years ago, I was in LA, and I was talking to crossword puzzle constructors, and I realized that that process is really interesting. It's not something I'd ever really thought about. You know, when you play a crossword, you're mostly focused on solving the clues. The board is just this kind of background element that supports the experience. But if you're constructing a puzzle, the board is the focus, because fitting all the words in is an interesting challenge in and of itself. And I thought, I wonder if there's a game in there. I wonder if fitting the letters into a board such that all the resulting words are legal is something.
Right. Someone mentioned that the window, we're a little small.
Oh, we're a little small. Bigger. Okay, we can get a little larger.
Yeah, that is a little. All right, perfect. So that was back in the winter of 2019. And you and I were working on a bunch of different prototypes. We had like 5 prototypes that we were going to take to GDC for the spring of 2020. And I don't quite remember why we didn't bring stuff to
what happened
GDC
in 2020?
Spring 2020. So this would have been like November-ish, and we were here at the apartment. We were working on this like generative open world remaster of BitPilot, and you showed me this like little puzzle that you'd made that was like just a grid that was scribbled on a piece of paper, and you like gave me some bananagrams tiles, and you said place these tiles so that everything is a word. And this seemed super cool, but we were like, I did it and it was fun, and then we went to lunch, and you were
I was like, this is cool, right? But like, how will we come up with these puzzles? Because I got this idea from crossword constructors, and they're building these like puzzles by hand, right?
Yeah, you were like kind of down about it. You were like, this is a great game, but we can never ship it because we'd have to spend too much time making puzzles, or we'd have to get someone to make puzzles. And then, I had been thinking a lot about this kind of generation because one of those prototypes was a roguelike, and I was doing a lot of generative stuff, and I was just like, I'm not sure, but I think like I can make some of these puzzles. And you were super skeptical. I was like, I think I can make a generator that can make these. And I said, let's drop BitPilot for the rest of the afternoon. Give me a few hours. I think I can do this. And by that evening, we had something like super janky and super slow, and Unity would crash if you tried to generate a puzzle with the letter Q in it. But it could generate these puzzles.
So what Jack is saying is, if afterwards you're like, why don't we have a BitPilot sequel?
Right.
It's Jack's fault.
It's my fault. I'm sorry.
So that was the first version of what we ended up calling Packwords. And we thought it was pretty interesting. Eventually the prototype grew into something that looked like this. So here we have this grid of intersecting words that looks a lot like the piece of paper, and there are a bunch of letters on the bottom. and there are a bunch of letters preset in the puzzle, and the idea is to try to fit all these letters into the grid such that all of the resulting words are valid. And this game was really fun. I was really thrilled when Jack put the prototype together. We played it a lot, and this game really managed to fulfill a lot of the requirements that I listed up top for like my own personal holy grail puzzle game. But ultimately, we stopped working on it because it had a couple of big problems. It turned out that even though it was cool if you knew what you were doing with words, for non-high level word game players, it just was very hard to start. It felt very uncomfortable and intimidating when you looked at the big grid of space, and nothing shouted out to you, this is where to start. And then worse than that, high skill players were just cruising through these puzzles because they were small, and if we made the puzzles bigger puzzles meant a bigger pool of tiles to work in, and then even those high skill players would start to feel really lost.
And before we go on, I just want to say, also, if you look at this puzzle and contrast it to the puzzle that Zach originally gave me, it's much less dense because the way that the rules work, like if you're automatically generating these, a lot of these puzzles will have multiple valid solutions or like permutations of words that are valid. And so the puzzle quality was not high based on what we were doing.
Yeah. So we sat on it for a bit, and that GDC that we'd made it for never happened, so we never got to show it to anybody until now. We never saw human beings again in person.
I couldn't even grow facial hair when GDC started.
We were all 12.
Yeah.
And so anyway, we didn't know what to do, so we just kind of moved on, and we started thinking about our Good Sudoku started getting built, and we moved our focus over to that. And that ended up being a really cool experience for me. Good Sudoku was like a really fundamental experience for me, specifically in terms of these kinds of puzzles. Because when you're playing some of these puzzles and enjoying them as a fan, you sort of get this sense that like what makes these puzzles perfect is the brilliance of the rules. That like Sudoku, like what a brilliant idea to like say row, column, house, like no duplicate numbers. That's it. It's gonna be perfect. But the reality is, I was like, we can make a Sudoku game. I'm just gonna do these things, and then we'll like bloop, get a bunch of puzzles and put them in. But it turns out that like actually almost every Sudoku that's out there is bad, right? Well, it's not true at all that they just magically work.
Yeah, so like to kind of speak to what you're saying, like neither of us had really played that much Sudoku. Neither of us were Sudoku fans when you had that original idea for Sudoku and showed it to me, Good Sudoku, and showed it to me, which I was skeptical about. That was my turn to be skeptical. I was like, I don't know if this is good or not. Is Sudoku good?
Yeah, that's
like
the name.
We didn't. We just like never had thought much. I know I had never thought much about Sudoku, and I just assumed that generating them would be less interesting and less trivial than like making a dungeon for a roguelike. I was, the game's so ubiquitous that it feels pretty inevitable that like puzzles will be easy to make. And it turns out that like once we started thinking about this problem and trying to tackle it, that there was just like hidden rules of puzzle generation that like I personally had never thought about. That like basically every grid of 9x9 numbers with spaces in it is not actually a Sudoku puzzle, right?
In fact, like most of them are not.
Right. And so we can just like take a step back and just like throw out like anything that's like invalid by default. Like if you generated a grid that had like all 5s in it, we're just going to ignore that.
Right.
Like if you take this, for example, like this is a Sudoku puzzle that does not have a solution, right?
Well, it has a solution. It actually has a lot of solutions.
There are actually millions and millions of possible arrangements of numbers that would fulfill Sudoku's one rule, which, there's maybe some, is this a Sudoku? In the same area of our game's art?
Well,
maybe?
and on top of, not only are there millions, but it's somehow, even though there are millions, it would be very difficult for you to just fill this out in a way that was valid unless you'd had some kind of practice. Like, it's not easy to get from here to a solution, which is like, what? Isn't
right,
what?
Right. Just putting in the numbers so that it's valid is not in and of itself a totally trivial task. And, you know, in fact, if you think about a valid Sudoku, it is no, it's fine. I actually know what it is. It's like 5.8 million possible permutations of that Sudoku. You know, if you replace every 2 with every 5 and every 5 with every 2, or if you rotate the puzzle, or if you flip the puzzle, you can just take one Sudoku puzzle and make No,
I was just checking for We're good.
Got it.
Keep going.
If you take one Sudoku puzzle, you can make about 5.8 million. It's like 16 times n factorial minus 1, because you have the one that you started with. And so you have like this almost 6 million puzzles out of this one puzzle that are all going to be kind of essentially the same. And despite that, we've generated in the last 3 years tens of millions of puzzles, like at least 30 million puzzles, if not more. I haven't checked it in a while, but despite having generated that many, we have yet to generate 2 puzzles that are permutations of each other. And the reason why that is because there are a lot of valid Sudoku puzzles. I didn't end up removing the bullet from this next slide, so forgive me. But if you go to the next slide, this is the number. So you can tell that Zach does the graphic design and I do not do the graphic design. This was me just being like,
wow, brutal.
This looks great. Yeah. True brutalism in graphic design. So yeah, there are so many. Someone actually sat down and calculated how many valid Sudoku puzzles there are. There's so many possible valid Sudoku puzzles. So what is the takeaway from this? The takeaway was that we realized we're never going to be able to just like make all the puzzles and pick our favorites. Like we would, that would, like, the heat death of the universe would potentially come before we had made all the puzzles. And this is not even considering, like, is this puzzle interesting, or is this puzzle boring? Is this puzzle hard, or is this puzzle easy? Just, is this puzzle a puzzle?
Right.
Was not in and of itself trivial. And so we just had to get smarter about how we solved these kinds of problems.
And I think one other thing that I just want to say, to like go back to this example, this idea that like for a player, this is an impossible puzzle. Like I would have thought that this is an easy puzzle, right? There's no constraints. You can just put whatever numbers you want into this and you'll get to a valid Sudoku. But the reality is it's so hard to even come up with a valid Sudoku puzzle that this is a really hard puzzle, and that a puzzle with a lot more numbers in it is actually easier because Sudoku has that magical funnel effect. It tells you how to get to the answer in a way that you would not have been able to do if the puzzle hadn't been designed to get you to do that. And that is like thinking about, how to solve that. How do we generate these puzzles that can help the player solve them in a variety of contexts with a variety of approaches and a variety of techniques? Like that's sort of what we learned from Sudoku.
Right.
And that made me realize that if we look back at that list, there's actually a 5th requirement that I never really thought about before, and I realized it with good Sudoku. And that 5th requirement is variety. The rule set has to support a huge variety of difficulties, and that was the thing that Packwords was just totally failing on. The rule set sort of like converged in itself and forced it to be small and hard or too easy. You couldn't make a big puzzle. And so we spent a lot of time coming up with that great Sudoku generator for good Sudoku.
And I'll talk about that like a little bit more later.
Yeah. And then after wrapping good Sudoku, I was doing some research into newspaper puzzle games, and I came across this game Word Slide over at The Sun. which I do not recommend that publication, but this game is kind of interesting. So this game sort of blew my mind because it's incredibly close to Packwords, first of all. But it has this extra element of only being able to move the tiles within their own row or column. And to me, I was really surprised because this is a really elegant way to limit the utility of a tile to a particular area in the puzzle. And that's really important because it allows for more variety in puzzle size. The puzzle that we're looking at has almost twice the number of tiles that our Packwords puzzles had, but it doesn't really feel that way. It felt, kind of small. But the struggle with Word Slide is that the puzzle design itself, their generation, isn't super great.
Or consistent, I would say.
Yeah. Well, that's what good is. The company that designed it, they kind of only built like a first pass generator. Or, I don't know, I'm sure it was very hard, but to my mind, it was only kind of like a mediocre generator because the difficulty of these puzzles is really swingy. There's not always great places to start, and that kind of makes it a bad experience to play, even though it should be a really good experience because it's this really interesting kind of elegant set of rules. But I was so impressed with it that I showed it to Jack, and I thought, maybe we can take the sliding but come up with something similar and get inspired and put something in Packwords that makes it work, that isn't this, that we can build a great generator for. And we were kind of just throwing it back and forth until Jack was like, well, what if we took all the letters, instead of putting them around the grid, we put them only on the top and the left of the grid of all sides, like Ken.
And which, and by Ken, I meant nonograms, right? Ken
right, because if you really think about it, what Jack said to me doesn't make any sense, because that's not how Ken works. Ken is a puzzle about groups of clues. Yeah. And wait a minute, oh my God, whoa, what if I built this puzzle really quickly and sent it to Jack? It's crosswords plus Ken. And this is basically Knotwords. It came together in 10 seconds after Jack said the thing by accident.
Right.
And honestly, when we show you the game later, it basically looks like this.
Yeah.
I sent it to Jack. He solved it. He sent it to some friends. They solved it. And I started asking people where they started on the puzzle. Some people saw donut first. Other people saw nil. If you don't understand how the puzzle works from just guessing, basically in each of these sections there are a couple letters, and you have to put the letters in the grid such that all of the words, horizontal and vertical, are valid. And so some people started with nil, some people saw donut really quickly, and then they just kind of went from there until they had solved the whole puzzle. You can see this is why I type instead of write with a pen or a mouse. But honestly, this is actually probably better than my real life handwriting. But anyway, instantly, we were just so thrilled and enamored about this puzzle. And it was weird because usually, your first attempt at putting together an example of a puzzle is fine. But this was really interesting right away.
Yeah, and I'm really glad I said the wrong thing.
Yeah. You always say the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about you.
Of course.
So Jack got to work sort of going back to the Packwords generator and refitting it with all the lessons we learned from Good Sudoku. And I traded hand-built puzzles with some friends who were also game designers, and used that time to iterate on the graphic design and sort of see what was possible. How big could puzzles get? How dense could they be? How hard could the words be?
Yeah, and without getting too deep into the technical aspects or really designery stuff too much, basically the biggest takeaway that we had from generating puzzles for Good Sudoku for me was that logic puzzles are roguelikes, right? So we've figured out how to tell if a puzzle is interesting or not by thinking of it the way that we would think about a dungeon in a roguelike, right? Each step that you are taking while you're solving a puzzle, you have from that point a certain number of directions you can go, and whatever one you choose gives you another set of directions you can go. Sometimes you'll go down a path and it'll turn into a dead end and you have to backtrack. Sometimes you go down one path and you accidentally skip the boss and you end up right at the end of the dungeon. And sometimes the obstacles are too high level, sometimes they're too low level. This is my second slide. You can tell I've got some good graphic design chops. You gotta love the left-in cropped white in the 5. All right, so we've been approaching the problem of generating these kinds of puzzles from a mathematical perspective, right? But what ended up making the puzzles fun was teaching the generator to solve the puzzles the way that we were solving them, and then looking at the steps that it took, right? So we just kind of sat down and started examining what we were thinking when we were solving the Knotwords puzzles and what we were thinking when we were solving the good Sudoku puzzles, right? What are we looking at? What did we assume about the information that we had versus what we knew for certain? What drew our eye? What steps are easier to take? What techniques are difficult to spot? And
what kind of formations are interesting and compelling right at the start of a puzzle versus at the end of a puzzle?
Right. And suddenly we just weren't making random puzzles. We were letting the generator make a puzzle and then take a few cracks at solving it and look at each of those attempts and say well, how many interesting decisions were there? How tough were the techniques it had to use? When did it make mistakes? What did those mistakes cost in terms of time? How much, how wide is the decision space at each moment? And so this is when we were really leaning on our skills as game designers, right? We looked at this experience of generating puzzles, the way that we would look at a play test. We observed the solver solving the puzzle. We generalized what we were seeing and the feedback we got into principles that we tried to apply to the generation process. And, is the generator making mistakes when it sees a shape? Then we need to come up with a technique to identify that shape. Is the generator blazing through the puzzles because they're there's just a lot of easy techniques to see? Then we need to maybe remove some of those landmarks that it's using to get to the really easy techniques really fast. And, what was great about that is that it moved generation back to this collaborative place, not one where I was just writing algorithms and it was spitting stuff out. Instead, we were sitting down and, talking about what things we were thinking about, how we were solving the puzzles, what we liked, what we didn't like, and trying to get more of that. We were really in this iterative playtesting space. And so we did the same thing with Knotwords, really. Zach, you would make a puzzle by hand and you would describe your thought process, and then I would take that and generalize it, or we would play some completed puzzles and we would talk about what changes we would make if we were making the puzzle by hand, and then put that into the algorithm, and then we play a puzzle and we talk about what was hard or easy and interesting or boring and what techniques we were using, and then that goes right into a curation algorithm. And really the biggest takeaway is that computers are really dumb, and that they do what you tell them even if it's a bad idea or you make a mistake while you're describing what you want it to do. And so this constant refinement process of tweaking and observing and measuring and changing, and that's really what the last few months were.
Yeah,
right?
and then we solved all the bugs and did all the design.
Oh yeah, and it's perfect.
And now we're here. And so yeah, I think we can. This is behind us is a is a bookshelf, and then behind us virtually is just some video of what the generator looks like while it's running. This is real-time video of it. But yeah, we can just take a look at Knotwords and maybe play today's puzzle and look at some other puzzles. And while we're doing that, we can
I'll pull some questions.
Talk a little bit about questions. It's really
Let's
embarrassing to play something live and not know the answers, but we'll see. So the puzzles do get harder throughout the week, and so hopefully this will be pretty easy. All right, well, this one's a good starting point because that has to be did. There's really no other options there.
And so when you're selecting a cell, it's showing you oh, this is the area that these letters go into, and you can look at the keyboard and see oh, these are the keys. It's on the board grid as well, but
yeah, there's a lot of thinking about okay, this has to fit on a phone, and so what if the puzzle's really big and it's too small to see the things? How do we sort of highlight that stuff? This is probably bats, but I'm like,
Bats? Yeah, probably.
I think we can just take a guess.
Yeah.
And then this is almost definitely ES.
Or it's
because
tabs. It could be tabs.
It could be tabs.
But-
And this could be SS, but it probably isn't
No,
with the
yeah.
E there. Or maybe it is.
It might be.
It is, actually.
Yeah,
because this has to be pass.
pass. It can't be.
And so that's going to be the E, and then this is going to be the L.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And then I do wonder if this is tabs, actually.
Yeah, I'm not sure. This is not staged. Okay, so
This is
something PL.
seems wrong. This is
Lass.
Ales. This is ales.
Oh,
And now
interesting. So, is it ideal? And it's apes. Ideal and
Oh my
apes.
god. This is a tough one.
Yeah,
And
good Monday
ideal.
puzzle.
Good catch. All right.
Yeah. I think the top one might be data then.
Yep.
Except so
And this is damp.
and
then
remit.
remit and ties, and we did it. Oh my god, what a nightmare to do that live. What an easy puzzle. I'm really feeling like when I test these and I'm like lurking over someone's shoulder and I'm like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. That's what we're doing. All right. So I guess
Why don't you play a couple more and I'll
how
if anyone has any
embarrassing.
questions and you want to just throw them into the chat.
oh, what a nightmare. All right, well, that's what I know what the answer is. Yeah, so I don't know if there are any
we did talk for a while. What platforms are this on? That's a great question. It's going to be launching this Thursday on Steam for Mac and PC. It's going to be on Android and it's going to be on iOS. And in fact, I think you can wishlist it on Steam now or soon.
Oh, in a minute. At the end.
In a
So
minute.
after we're done with this.
After we're done
we
with this,
will,
you can wishlist it on Steam.
Or maybe I'll just do that right now while we're talking.
Yeah.
Oh, no. I got to
Nope,
do two-factor authentication. I'll do it later.
Do it.
After we're done, as soon as we shut this down, we'll launch it on Steam so that you can wishlist it over there.
Yeah.
And also the bunny. The bunny's very exciting for us. Nelson Bowles, who did a lot of animation and art on Card of Darkness, animated the bunny. And also our little logo, which you'll see someday. If you watch the trailer, pasta. I love it. And so getting the bunny in. The bunny also gives us little definitions.
Oh yeah.
And goes away and gives you hints. So the bunny is a big part of.
Did we code it in Unity? Yeah, we did it in Unity just because it is really easy to do a lot of cross-platform support using that.
Oh no. Figure that out.
Okay. Can you leave blank spaces in a knot? Yeah, this is actually a good example of one. Have you used... or do you mean like in an area can some be empty? Ben Sawyer asks why we didn't license Clippy. We have a lot of... It might be scenes?
Yeah, I thought about
or
that.
Sieve?
But reserve. There we go. So that's an example of I knew that something was up in the middle of the puzzle and I didn't want to figure it out, so I thought I'd go to another part of the puzzle and then solve that, and then that would help me with the beginning, which it did. It gave me 3.
And someone in the chat got it a second before.
Oh, well, of course they did. There are many of them, and I am trying to help answer questions. Why didn't we license Clippy? No one likes Clippy. Actually, that was a whole thing when I was originally we want to have a mascot in this game. Jack was like, "Oh, Clippy, I don't know. We got to be careful." Yeah. And so a lot of thought went into where is the rabbit going to exist, and what will the rabbit do to make sure that the rabbit is not helpful like Clippy. The rabbit is just like a part of the app that is fun when they show up and celebrates you, and will give you help if you ask for it. But is also, the rabbit also gives you hints, and the way we do hints in this game is that we give you the definition of the word without the word. So the rabbit is actually kind of also a little bit puzzling and a little bit of kind of like a jerk. They're not always so helpful to you.
Someone says we're on Clippy Nostalgia. Okay.
Is it going to be the same puzzles for every user daily? Yes, it is. And progress is not tracked across platforms, but we will be shipping. On Steam, we do have cloud save support, and
we will have cloud save.
We will have cloud save support after launch on iOS and Android.
Yeah, it might take a couple of days because we want to make sure we get it right the first time.
Yeah.
All right, what was our approach for curating a word list for generating puzzles? So, I mean, essentially, there are a lot of like considerations that tend to be related to like how common that word is in usage in the English language, how unique it is from the letters. A lot of the stuff that we were talking about earlier, where it's like, oh, okay, so if this word is going to create an area where there's only one possible word, that's not that ideal. But if it's going to create something where there's actually a lot of opportunity for like interesting space, like we definitely want to pick it. That it's essentially it's extremely complicated, and maybe one day I'll do a talk about it.
And we did also. We did also play a lot of puzzles, and if words showed up that seemed wrong, we flagged them and sort of thought about it. Are there ways that we can identify these via the definitions or the aspects of the word, like the part of speech that maybe just don't make for good puzzles? Like we noticed that interjections are just not a very good word for puzzles.
AAH is like
right.
Zach would say that's a word. I would say that's not a word. And regardless, it's like not like super interesting as like a puzzle, or in a puzzle context. Also, just because people were asking about the dailies, so we have a couple years of backlog of these puzzles on launch as well. So there will definitely be a lot to play.
Oh my God, there are so many questions. Are there leaderboards for the daily? So there aren't leaderboards, and in fact, we're really here. Why don't you play a little? bit?
I'll
yeah. So there are not leaderboards, and we specifically wanted there to kind of not be leaderboards because one of the things about this game is we really view it as like a very true to puzzle game where the goal is to solve the puzzle, and there's no points, there's no structure to it other than that. We just either you've solved the puzzle or you haven't solved the puzzle, and it didn't feel right to sort of have that competitive component to it. That said, we do have, like, you can track your times, you can share your times online, you can share puzzles and attach your time to them, and you can sort of have your calendar where you've played all your puzzles, display your time so you yourself can do that, but it's just sort of hidden behind a menu option. So that stuff kind of is there, but it's not directly competitive online, and it's a little bit hidden. Did Wordle influence any of your design decisions? Oh my God, Wordle influenced so many of our design decisions, actually. I don't even know if it's worth... I feel like I would take so much time to just talk about that stuff.
Yeah, everything that we spend a lot of time doing, I would say, influences us, because I know I can only speak for myself, but I feel like you and I tend to be really interested in making things that are part of a habit, or like something that fits into a very specific part of your routine. And so Wordle, anything that's in the cultural zeitgeist or that we're doing regularly is going to have a huge outsized impact on us.
Yeah.
Right? But we were, I think, as you got from this talk, we've been unknotting this pretzel for 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, I would say one very clean example with Wordle is we are... The focus on this game is really in playing daily puzzles, either one puzzle a day or two puzzles a day. There is a section that is sort of like a puzzle book that has more puzzles, but we really focus you on playing just one or two puzzles a day. And that allowed us to do a kind of different structure, which is also very Wordle-y, where there are no ads in the app at all, even if you haven't paid for it. Paying just gives you access to more puzzles, a different set of dailies, palettes and stuff like that. But we were able to sort of think about maybe it's worth it to just not include ads at all, which is a really weird and intense decision because really if you look at how much money iOS apps makes, ads frequently account for like 50%, which is like an unbelievable amount. So we're trying something new, and some of that is Wordle inspired. Will the region borders be customizable? They look a bit thin or hard to distinguish from regular grid lines. Yes, actually, maybe Jack, you can turn it on. We have a larger font. Oh, it's actually on. They're actually thinner than what you're looking at. We have a larger font version, which if you're looking at it on a phone, it's pretty substantial. But yeah, so the thing with the region borders is there was one thing that people sometimes got confused about in this game, and that was the idea that you're not making words within the individual sections, but across the entire puzzle. And to build, construct, edify.
Wow, the past. Amazing.
Reefs. Nice. Good co-op. Oh my God, what was I thinking about? Oh yeah, so we wanted to actually make sure that the section lines were somewhat thin, so that it wouldn't give that impression that these sections were wholly separated from each other. And when you play, it's actually quite easy to get to like understand what's happening, because anytime you click into any of the sections, it also highlights the whole section for you, so that helps. How much will the game cost? So the game is totally free, and it has no ads, and it gives you a daily every day, and a 10 extra puzzles a month. We don't have tracking.
Oh, because we're not on Steam yet.
Yeah. And then if you want to play and buy the game, which would give you more dailies, 30 puzzles a month, hit the entire history of dailies, so you can play puzzles that aren't on the exact same day. It's either a $5 a year subscription with a free trial, but then also because like nobody likes subscriptions, including us, we just have like a $12 one-time purchase. That's just the game, and you don't have to worry about any of that. And then on Steam for Mac and PC, there's nothing at all. It's just the $12 sort of one-time purchase. All right. Oh my God. What is the font in the puzzle? The font in the puzzle is Rain. Black. We use a couple of different fonts in this game. In fact, we use a lot of fonts and we use really 2 fonts, but we use many weights of those fonts. There is a lot of font work in this game, probably because it's not a very complicated game, but we spent a long time on the generator, and I spent a long time thinking about what the visual design was going to look like. Will the full version be part of the Apple Arcade thingy? No, so we didn't do Apple Arcade with this, and the biggest reason, honestly, is because I'm worried that people are going to try to rip this game off because it's very simple and straightforward, and I didn't want to be building the game into a place that was a super limited specific audience where we wouldn't be able to put it out on a lot of other platforms at the same time. Do you find a big difference between generated and handcrafted or heavily edited and curated generated puzzles in terms of traps, jokes, other sort of bespoke perversity? It being words instead of numbers seems like it adds a lot of possibilities. Yeah, so we actually do have some generated puzzles that are kind of theme-based or have other twists that are in the puzzle books. But yeah, definitely, if you're going to build one, there's a lot of space for doing like funny, cute things or jokes or like strange ideas, just like with crosswords or Sudokus or anything like that. All of those puzzle spaces have a ton of stuff in that space. And one of the things that we want to do at some point is get a puzzle editor out there so that people can hand build them. The thing is, these puzzles are actually quite easy to hand build. They're much easier to hand build than they are to generate because it's just very easy. It's something that humans are quite good at. And they're really fun to build. I think we had a lot of fun building them by hand before we had the generator. But beyond that, though, actually, Jack did a really good job. The generator is incredibly good at building these super dense puzzles. And if we were to pull up some of the puzzles that we built before the generator existed, they're very similar.
And there is a little bit of room for some jokes. I think you'll enjoy some of the jokes in the in the puzzles, even though they're
Yeah.
that I don't want to give anything away.
So let's see. We have 10 more minutes to 3, so we'll go for 10 more minutes with questions if there are questions, and otherwise we'll call it. What Unity text render do you use? I'm a fan of Super Text Mesh. We just use Text Mesh Pro. We've been using Text Mesh Pro for a while, and we use it to render all kinds of weird things, like all the icons and everything in the game are also through Text Mesh Pro, so they scale. High key. This is so clean it's going to end up in the New York Times. Yeah, come at me, New York Times. I tried to talk to the New York Times. They're very difficult to get a hold of, but it would be fun. Did you keep? We are thinking about trying to do books if it's popular. I think this would be really fun in books. We've before it started, we played them on pen and paper, and it's a really good pen and paper puzzle. That's not how you want that to go. Did you keep your Packwords theme mechanic where all the words have to be about like Halloween or something? Yes, we did. There are theme puzzles in the game, and they work exactly like that. Something that Jack is doing here is we have a bunch of really sort of extra in word input mechanics, which is like if you click on a cell and then drag in a direction, it'll switch to trying to input across the entire board so that you can do multiple like type across zones if you see a certain kind of thing. And also there's a lot of people, we noticed some people like to play like that in general, and so you can switch the entire input scheme to, instead of being zone based, being sort of word focused where you're always typing across zones. Oh, it's Nate Boziet. Let me know if you want an intro to the New York Times Games team. Nate, sure. I tried. I had an intro to one of the people on. I know one of the people on the team, actually. We've talked a lot, and they couldn't get me through to the print team. So I don't, it's just a giant black box. Did you ever consider replacing, but Nate, if you can help, hit me up, man. I would love that. Did you consider placing the letters on the grid and having the player swap them rather than having a keyboard? Offhand, it seems like I would prefer this on mobile. Yeah, so the thing is, like if you place, we've talked about this.
We've considered everything, potentially.
Yeah.
I mean, not everything, obviously, but...
Yeah, there are a couple of real difficulties with having the letters be on the grid already, but the biggest thing is that it actually makes the puzzle very imposing and terrifying when you first start, because there are just a billion letters and they're taking all of your attention, and there are a million words that are wrong, and there are crossouts everywhere, and it actually makes it really difficult to wire, to get through the it makes it really difficult to do the beginning part of the process of the puzzle where you're looking at it and trying to think about where all of the different pieces are. It does seem like it would be a good aesthetic choice, but it's actually quite hard. And then the other part of it that's tough with tiles is your fingers covering the thing that you're dragging, whereas on a phone you're actually, it's much easier to see what's going on. And in fact, I'm just booting it up on my phone so I can just show you. I'll hold it up to the camera like a real professional.
Should I show a category puzzle after that?
Do you know how to get to one right away? You're going to have to force your way through the puzzle book. I think I just keep playing this. So something else that we did, which actually I'm really excited about, is if you grab around on the keyboard, you get a little cursor that allows you to select any square you want. And that makes it really comfortable to sort of just type on the bottom of the screen as if it's your normal text keyboard. And your fingers already know where all the keys are, so inputting words is really, really easy. Does this game have haptic feedback? Love that in Flip-Flop Solitaire. Yep. It definitely does. What are you most proud of with how this turned out? Honestly, I just can't believe, Orta, thanks for good to see you. Thanks for being here. Honestly, I can't believe we found this game. This is the only game I think I've ever built. I guess Really Bad Chess. Really Bad Chess's prototype was 10 minutes, and this prototype was 15 seconds, and both of them basically look exactly the same in the final product as they were in the prototype. And those are really the only games that are like that. It's just a very bizarre experience to find a game like that, and I honestly, most of the time that we spent making this game, we were thinking, Jesus, we got to get this out because what if somebody else comes up with this idea? Because it just seems so straightforward, and it's kind of amazing that nobody's done it before. And I think the part of it that's most exciting to me is a lot of these puzzles that I really like, the feel of like Picross and Sudoku, they're really good, but they're like a little bit sort of like antiseptic because they're so logic and numbers based. And this game isn't like that. There's like all of this logic, but there's also, you can just be in a flow and just see it and see all the words, or you can struggle. People have different sort of like intuitive responses about the way that language works. It's just like a really holiday. Yeah. It's just a really, I don't know. It was very exciting to work on, and I love playing it, and I still play it. And I feel like it has a lot of potential, and it's very exciting. I don't know. You never know. Am I still using fonts for rendering graphics? I sure am. Is there any meaning to the scrolling grid background? It's very pleasing, so I kind of hope not. Yeah, no meaning. We just wanted to have something that was slow enough that it wouldn't distract you, but enough to like give a feeling of like it being considered place, yeah, because otherwise it's just a flat background, and that sucks. We also did a bunch of fun stuff with like the app changing colors over the day and the time that you're playing, and sort of celebrating you playing it at night in a different way than celebrating you playing it in the morning. What other kinds of puzzle are there besides classic? Okay, so there is actually, you want to do a tricky puzzle? So there's only one other major kind of puzzle, although we do have themes and things, but we have a daily twist puzzle. And twists are slightly different. They have, around the outside, they have numbers.
There's a couple, we don't need to give everything away. There are a couple
there are
other modes in the puzzle book.
Right, in the puzzle books there are all kinds of strange things. But as a major daily puzzle, there's these twist puzzles that have a lot more complexity in the grid, even though you can't see it, but there's actually like a lot more possibilities in the grid for what numbers could be, or for what words could be. And then we have these numbers on the side, and those numbers represent how many characters of A, E, I, O, or U are in that row or column. And they update as you play. So not only do you need to fill the grid with all the words that are valid, but you also need to make sure that by the end of it, all of the numbers are 0. And oftentimes to think through what the...
this is a great example.
Right. So by putting an A on the left, then the right has to be a V, which can't possibly be the case because, well, it could EV. Yeah, it's every.
Oh, yeah, it just can't be dire.
Yeah, there we go. So you end up sort of having to look at the numbers and think through sort of what they could mean in terms of what word possibilities are there. And on bigger puzzles, it starts to be pretty interesting because your choices on one side of the puzzle affect things that are happening on the other side of the puzzle because of those numbers. Jesse is saying, this is great. I recently replayed The Fool's Errand because of Sondheim's praise of it, and a few of these would have felt perfectly into the game and would have been enormously. Oh, thanks. Yeah, The Fool's Errand is pretty wild, and those puzzles are really hard. And weirdly, like, there's a type shift puzzle in the new Fool's Errand, so I guess me and that guy are thinking about the same things. Bad idea alert. The HTML version with embed code that can be inserted into every video game email newsletter that properly formats provides a preview and prior to a link to the full game. I will think about that. I can't parse the entirety of what that means right now. I can't. This too much. My brain's not there. Any chance you'll open source your dictionary? So we actually use WordNik, which is an open source dictionary. Yeah. So you can.
There is also the word list, which is separate.
Oh yeah, we do have a lot of weird curated word lists. We probably will not be open sourcing those, but maybe someday.
Probably not. Yeah.
Is this playing standalone or on the web? We're playing this right now in the Mac version. That's the Steam.
Standalone Steam version.
Standalone Steam.
If I was playing this faster, you'd see some Steam achievements.
Yeah. I really love Really Bad Chess so much. It's my favorite mobile game of our time. Thank you so much.
Longbone in the Forum.
How did you come up with the name of the game?
What's this
it's
bone?
catchy.
Not the femur. That's in your leg.
Oh my god.
I'm like stuck.
Whoa. I don't know. We'll figure that out.
Yeah.
It's every. Isn't that every?
It might be something else.
How did we come up with the name of this game?
Oh, I think I pitched you like here. You're the twist.
Thousands of names.
Yeah, thousands.
Months of hell.
Yeah, multiple months. Yeah, just getting a text message or a Slack message from me is definitely hell. But imagine, days and days of thinking about different names and different ideas, coming up with made-up words, some of which, ended up being under different trademarks and copyrights that people were sitting on. Any notable names that almost made the cut? Can we give away the...
I mean, I guess so. So maybe not. I don't know. So something you probably don't know is that word games are the most impossible genre of game to name because everybody on Earth has come up with some funny bit of wordplay or pun and then used that to name their Scrabble ripoff or whatever other word game they're ripping off.
Their very unique and genuine new idea that is in the word game space.
Yeah.
Radii. And ride.
Idly.
Whoa!
It was every. Yeah. So it was hell. I don't know. I don't think we should go through. But there were a billion.
There were a lot.
It was so stressful.
I was gonna say the one that we almost went with, but
what did we almost go with? You can say
it was copyrighted.
Oh, Packle?
Yeah. We almost. So the working title, and this was before Wordle really blew up, was Packle, and then I was like, we can't go with Packle, and you were like, we cannot come up with a new name because we'd already been through all of it, and it turned out that Packle is trademarked by someone else who's not using it.
No, they're using it. They're using it to. It's like.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's trademarked. So I pitch Knotwords often and frequently, and I wore you down. Yeah, I think is the answer.
Yeah, but now I'm really into it. I have to say.
I know. Yeah.
You know. Bennett Foddy insisted that we call the game Macaroni for a very long time, and so it's actually Macaroni in the mock-ups and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, all right. So let's call this to an end. And tweet the tweets and get it running on Steam and
get it so you can wish list it.
Yeah.
Snack food.
A pack of jackals. Snack food.
A
big bag of salty
I'm
packles.
currently doing twin snakes right now.
Yeah, but thank you so much. This was really fun. I hope this was interesting.
Yeah.
And I hope we can do this again for the next game.
Yeah.
Because this was great. And we got to tell you all the stuff we thought about.
Yeah.
Or some of the stuff we thought about.
Thanks for coming to our baby shower / book talk.
We hope you enjoyed our baby shower.
Post pre-mortem.
Our pre-mortem. And please, the game comes out Thursday on iOS, Android, Mac, and PC over Steam. And we hope you buy it and enjoy it. And
it's free.
Don't run
on
into too many
Android.
bugs.
It's free on Android and iOS. Good, just try it out.
Yeah, and if you run into bugs, don't ever tell us about them. We're going deep into hibernation, and we're never coming out. And this is it. This is the last game.
This is the last game ever.
All right.
Bye.
Peace.